This is the Neo Show, where the minds shaping tomorrow speak today. Brought to you by Neo, the browser redefining what AI can do for you.
Okay, welcome to another Meet the CEO, and also we do that together with Neo Show. Neo Show, we actually have been doing that on a weekly basis for quite a few weeks. The goal is actually talk to people about AI. Many of them are founders, CEOs, and some of them are investors, professors. So that's our goal. But today I'm very happy to have my friend Gagan. I first knew about Gagan when he was actually a founder CEO of another startup. I let him talk about his experience, Sprig, because I was at Greylock as a EIR, and then people say, hey, our lunch all came from Sprig. So maybe you can introduce yourself about your background first, and then before we get into, more meaty stuff.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I've been a founder for about 15 years, almost, a little more. I've started my career by co-founding Udemy, which today is the largest enterprise and consumer learning company for adults. Then second, I started Sprig, where Howie was when Howie was at Greylock. They backed my company. We raised $60 million. It was a food delivery company. It was like a ghost kitchen. We had a central kitchen in San Francisco and one in Palo Alto where we served food hot, $15, 15 minutes, ready to eat.
Is that similar to Travis' current company or different?
It's in the same general space, yeah, I would say, but the difference is that we were an actual restaurant and we did not. Travis's company, so Travis Kalanick, CEO of Uber, ended up starting a different company called Cloud Kitchens. Cloud Kitchens today is a real estate play primarily, where they have kitchens all over the world in opportunity zones, so like low-income neighborhoods where they can take the real estate that's relatively cheap and upzone it basically, or like increase the value of it by turning it into ghost kitchens that then deliver food to you. So if you order on DoorDash or Uber Eats or whatever in a given zip code, it's very, very common that your food is not coming from a restaurant, a retail restaurant. It's, probably 80% do come, I don't know what the percentage is, but a significant percentage come from retail restaurants, but it's a sizable percentage are coming from ghost kitchens. These kitchens that don't have no person can go in and just pick up food there. And Travis runs a business like that. Sprig was fully vertically integrated. So we were a ghost kitchen that also owned we didn't own the real estate, rented the real estate, but and had an app, and we managed the menu and had, we had at our peak, we had 1,300 employees because we hired all the delivery drivers. We had all of the cooks in the kitchen. And then we had a headquarters staff of about 60 to 100, sort of knowledge workers.
And then you sort of what happened to the company, and then you put it on the LinkedIn that this is the part of the journey you learned the most. I actually was always curious, why did you say I learned the most from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I was 21, 22 years old when I started Udemy. I didn't know anything. So and we happened to have quite a bit of success. It was extremely difficult. We had a really hard time raising money. We all went into debt. It was a very hard journey, but at the same time, when you have success, you don't really know why sometimes if you've never had true failure. So Sprig was really interesting because we had more success than Udemy in the first 2.5 years of Sprig. Sprig grew extremely quickly. If you lived in San Francisco at that time, and you were in the age demographic, sort of 25 to 40-year-old, single or married, that demographic, you use Sprig. We had insane penetration in San Francisco market.
That was 2015.
Right. Yeah, our peak was February 2016. So yeah. And then Uber Eats launched their DoorDash competitor. So Uber Eats had many iterations. Most people don't know this, but eventually they copied DoorDash. And when they copied DoorDash, they came in to the market subsidizing the market. They probably spent billions of dollars subsidizing the food delivery market because they believed, just like in rideshare, they assumed that the way to win food delivery was going to be keeping the ETA as low as possible. So they tried to do 30-minute deliveries or less, and keeping the price as low as possible. So they subsidized the food costs as well a little bit. And they took 30% from the restaurants. So this is a slightly different model from DoorDash. Essentially, that killed Sprig's advantage. Sprig's advantage versus DoorDash or Postmates was that we were fast and we were healthy. We were more affordable. Now, Uber Eats got rid of the fast, right? Because we were like 15 to 20 minutes. They were 30 minutes, not enough of a difference for a consumer to care. And they got rid of the cost because they selected restaurants that were cheap. And they marketed and they offered delivery for a different type of restaurant than DoorDash, which was a more premium experience at the time and really wasn't in SF. It was mostly Postmates, and Postmates was super premium and expensive. So they killed the competitive advantage of Sprig at a time when Sprig was facing major pressure on margins. We were really struggling to keep up with the rising demand meant rising costs, and we were not getting the efficiencies at scale that we were hoping yet. And so we were focused on our margins while Uber Eats was coming in and taking all of our top line revenue. And so from that point on, the week Uber Eats launched, literally in SF, our business went from growing 2 to 4% a week, which is an insane growth rate. If you just do the math on compounding, you're talking, I don't remember, but it's like 5 to 7x a year. It's very fast. Not in the AI era. Pre-AI era, it was very fast. But we were going like 2 to 4% a week. And then we went to declining 2 to 4% a week.
What is the number one lesson if you would have done all over again and then still do you think there is a chance for Sprig to be alive if you would have a chance with all the hindsights?
Totally. It's a complex lesson. So what I would say is, VCs always talk about how the number one thing in a market, they always debate between people or market. And obviously as a VC, that makes sense. You either get into food delivery or you go and you invest in AI in 2010, which would have been a very bad decision mostly. Or you focus on augmented reality or virtual reality, or you focus on self-driving cars, like whatever you decide to do. Food delivery was a huge market, right? Obviously between Uber Eats and DoorDash, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars in exits. Probably by terminus, like in 10 years, we're talking about we'll have over 100, we'll have at least one company over $100 billion in that market, right? And so huge opportunity. But there's something that misses, which is the approach. And the approach to the market actually matters as much as the market itself. And of course, I learned through that experience that the approach to the market was actually the defining characteristic of Sprig's failure. Now, the thing that makes it complex is Sprig still could have succeeded with its approach. There's another company called Thistle that was started around the same time that did not do a lot of the mistakes that Sprig and Muntree, our other main competitor, made. Essentially, if you're not on a venture speed trajectory, you're not growing at 3 to 5x a year with like the chance of 80% gross margins or 60% gross margins, then you have to raise less capital. You have to make that capital last longer. So you don't do 18 months between rounds. You do like 2.5, 3 years. And you have to get to profitability faster. Sprig could have gone that route. And if it did, I think it would still exist today. Now, there's another question of how big of a company would it be if Sprig existed today? I would argue it'd be a few $100 million. So it wouldn't be a multi-billion-dollar company. Probably it'd be very hard for it to get there. Thistle is just a few $100 million company. But so for the VCs, would it have been worth it? Probably not.
There is a path for hundreds of $1 million valuation. Is there any path for multi-billion-dollar valuation with all the hindsights?
It's possible within the approach, but the best thing would have been to change the approach. The best thing would not have been to have a vertically integrated food delivery product, but rather to take one slice of food delivery, whether it's real estate like what Travis did with Cloud Kitchens, or it's just the food, it's just the delivery part itself, which is what DoorDash, Postmates, and Uber Eats did. By taking the full stack, made it near impossible to get to a few $1 billion in 10 years.
Interesting. So Travis' approach would have been an interesting alternative. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see with cloud kitchens, but with Uber Eats, obviously, I mean, it's a $50 billion business probably valuation, maybe 20, 30, I don't know.
Okay, so we spend a lot of time. We're only halfway into the intro of your experience. Now, Maven, tell us more about why did you start a company? What's Maven doing? A lot of people knows Maven, but probably give us insights in why do you even do it in the first place?
Yeah, I'm actually very curious. Maven is a pretty new brand and it's just gaining steam. So I will take zero offense to honesty here. Do you mind if I ask the audience real quick? 2 questions. 1, how many people have heard of Udemy? Okay.
Wow,
it's
that's pretty much 90%, if not 95.
How many people here have heard of Maven? All right, 10%. By the way, we're not talking about Maven Apache, the software product, just to be clear. So Maven Learning is an online courses company. Okay, so let me explain Maven. So we started Udemy. We nailed the market at the time, which was for video-based learning. You go on Udemy, you go on Coursera, you go on LinkedIn Learning, you pay whatever amount of money for a course, and you can watch videos that help you learn a subject. Transformative for the time, but in my opinion, it's not the true transformation that education needs. College is rising at an insane cost. It's super expensive, and adults today don't have a good way of keeping up with modern technology. So with AI, where do you go to learn AI today? Are you going to go to Harvard or MIT's extension program? Are you going to get an MBA? I mean, what does Harvard know about AI? They invented AI, so on that front, they're very, very good at the very core research part, but they don't use AI. They don't know how to implement it at your job. They don't know what the trends are and what the business opportunities are. Most universities suck at this. So who's going to teach everyone here in the next 10 years, your entire job is going to be transformed by AI? Who's going to teach that? And the answer is Maven. I feel 40% confident now that Maven will be the #1 place that you will go to learn AI. So why? We have 2 major differentiators from Udemy and Coursera. The first differentiator is that we have real experts who know the field. So literally the head of product at OpenAI, one of the heads of product at OpenAI teaches on Maven, right? We have someone who was probably one of the top product managers, the first product manager at Stripe teaches on Maven, right? We have figured out how to curate a top tier set of experts, very different from Coursera or Udemy, right? Coursera is washed up professors, right? They don't know anything these days in the business world, at least. And then Udemy is literally random people on the internet. There's no curation whatsoever. Maven has nailed the curation of the expert. That's one thing. So this audience is primarily experienced professionals. You don't have time to spend 25 hours on YouTube to try to get the 10% of information that's useful to learn about AI. Instead, Maven offers you a 2-week program with an expert that in 12 hours or 15 hours of investment will upskill you dramatically in AI. That's the first thing. The second thing that Maven has nailed is it's cohort-based. So it's live. So most of you, at least half this audience, your entire life is run by your calendar at work. And what ends up happening 24 hours before the day of before today, for example, 24 hours in advance or 48 hours in advance, your 30-minute work blocks that you had on your calendar are gone. Someone takes them. Someone says, oh, you were going to do deep work that day? Sorry, let's go into a meeting, right? And so Maven essentially solves this problem of accountability and learning by putting it on your calendar. It's a live event with the instructor. You get to ask questions. There's other people in the room who are at your peer set who are learning with you. And it's a premium experience, right? It's high value. So that's what Maven is. We're just getting started. We recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, really built up our AI catalog and have started to become the #1 place on the internet for AI. And that's what I'm building today. And I'm CEO of the company.
But you started a company, what, 2019?
2020.
2020. When you started a company, were you thinking about AI, or can you tell us why you started this company? What was the thesis back then?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, when we started Maven, the thesis was that Zoom was a foundational new learning platform that essentially like pre-Zoom, and Zoom existed. We all used WebEx like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. Live education was possible for a long time, but the adoption wasn't there. There weren't enough users who were on Zoom calls on a regular basis to be learning live from an expert. But we know from education theory, like there's a ton of learning science on this, that live learning from an expert is the number one way you can learn. Actually, the number one way you can learn, if you can afford it, is a one-on-one coaching. Insanely expensive. If you want to learn AI via one-on-one coaching, you're talking about $30,000, right? It's not possible. The number two way to learn is by learning live with an expert in a classroom setting. So I saw that that was possible actually in 2019 and was looking at it. And then when the pandemic hit in 2020, I said, oh shoot, I got to stop looking at this thing. I got to do something about it. So started Maven, cohort-based learning. The problem was, as you all remember, 2020, 2021, 2022, huge boom in tech and then a huge crash. And Maven was really stuck in that crash. So we had a great first year and a half. We had a generally right thesis about cohort-based learning. The product did pretty well, made $4 million in its first year. And then all of a sudden the crash came and we were not, and we had raised $26 million and our business wasn't perfect. It was good, but it wasn't perfect. We hadn't quite nailed the product. We hadn't quite nailed the customer segment. And so from the Sprig days, I learned that in those moments, you get off the 18-month timeline. So instead of spending money like we were going to raise another round in 18 months, I took our burn all the way down to about 200 grand a month. Cut about half the team and said, we're going to ride this out because I still believe that cohort-based learning is the future. And then it took us we still have 10 million of our $26 million that we raised 4 years ago. That's unheard of in startups. You know this as a startup VC, former startup VC. And we kept the money in the bank and we just burned low amounts of money and kept building. And then, of course, and we were succeeding even before AI came around, but then ChatGPT came around about 3 years ago. And all of a sudden there's this huge need for upskilling in AI. And who was the one company that decided to stick it out? Like all of our competitors pivoted out of learning. Who was the one company that stuck it out? It was Maven. I felt like an idiot for a few years and then finally our time came. And so now a new set of learners are coming on Maven in droves to learn AI for product management, how to build agentic applications, how to use AI in marketing, right? We are starting to become the place for that. We still have a couple years left before I think we are the true winner, which is why I gave us a 40% chance of winning the market. But I think we've really done a lot and kind of got lucky that the timing worked out and just sort of we're lucky that we had a long runway, so we were able to take advantage of the opportunity.
So basically, when you started, this journey, it's more or less you saw the Zoom, the sort of the rising of the Zoom actually is going to make a big difference, right? Because that's making that infrastructure ubiquitous so that you can sort of make the cohort-based learning more reality. But then a few years ago, in the last few years, you almost kind of the way I think about it, you refounded the company with AI being the main thesis at this point, right? So you mentioned that for people in this audience, if you want to learn AI, don't go to whether Harvard, sort of the certificate program. Instead, Maven is better off, right? But how do you reconcile between people still feel like a Harvard certificate program has the reputation? Maven, I don't know, do you have certificates? Like how do I,
Yes.
How do I, if they don't come to this show, right, they wouldn't know you have a better curated teacher, better, the real value. So how do you deliver that message to people out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. Number one question I've gotten in my career is how do you compete with colleges which provide credentials, right? Udemy, non-credential program, competed with Coursera. For what it's worth, Udemy became a bigger revenue business. So we won that. We won sort of. It was kind of like 1 and 2. Both companies are great. I really admire Coursera as well. Maven, similar thing. We're competing with Harvard Extension School. We're not competing with Harvard MBA yet. We will eventually. So here's a question for you, Howie. when you are hiring for your, how big is your team that reports to you?
Not very big, but I think I know where you are getting to, because I
Wh- wh-
saw your LinkedIn post about Warren Buffett's
Yeah.
post, the statement that when he hired people, he doesn't look at which school, the person would have come from. Is that
Yeah,
where you're coming from?
That's where I'm coming from. Do
Okay.
you look at what school your employees come from? Do you know the school of your like peers, like the people who you work with the most?
I think it's a complicated question. I think there's still signaling thing. I wouldn't say I don't look at it, but I think you have to look at it in a balanced way, right? We have people from Yale, clearly there is signal in that. So I would say we look at it, but I think it really depends on, I was talking to a startup founder, right? He was hiring this chief revenue officer. I told him that when you hire a chief revenue officer, never look at the schools, because most of the very successful chief revenue officer would have come from a no-named school. So, that's just a reality in the last 20 years. But when you talk about, OpenAI engineers, oftentimes they come from very good schools. So
Totally agree. So probably like when I was, in my 20s, like many of you were probably working in that time frame, like in 2000 and 2005 to 2015. You knew every let's say you knew 100% of the people you work with schools, especially if you interviewed them. Today it's maybe 70%, 50%, something like that, right? You still know people's undergraduate education in a lot of contexts, but it's going down. I think in 10 years, it'll go to like 50% solidly, and eventually it'll go to 30 or 20%. So that trend is happening. But here's another question. How many of the people that you work with, about the certificate programs that they took? Zero, right? So Harvard and Stanford is still probably where you send your kids to undergrad if they get in. But after they're done with undergrad, do they just stop learning? Is it over? Well, in today's world, if you stop learning at 21 years old, when you graduate from college, you are screwed. So what Maven is saying, hey, yeah, you can continue to go to Harvard. I don't think it's going to last forever, but like for the next 10, 20 years, like maybe even my kids will, if they could get into to Harvard or Stanford, I might send them there. But after that, I'm going to teach them that they need to keep learning because the market will change. If you start as an IC and you have to become a manager, where are you going to learn leadership? Right? If AI is the future, where are you going to learn AI? You didn't learn that in school. That's already in the past. So what Maven does is it says, look, you can get the credential for your main primary degree, that's 4 years, et cetera. For everything else, you need to keep learning throughout your life. You don't care about the credential that much. What you care about is learning the skill so that you can present it at your job, so that when you're in an interview, the person knows you know the skill, and we do that.
Okay, so I think we're finally getting through the introduction part. So thanks for giving us the journey you have gone through. Now let's talk about the main topic I wanted to discuss, AI, right? All the impact of AI, the impact to your product, everything. Before everything, you have been a fresh user of AI native browser in the last 1 day, 2 days. What was your initial impression?
I think there's no question that we will have an AI native browser. I mean, as I started using Neo, I thought to myself, well, this is essentially, right, just like a very basic version. Sorry if I'm screwing this up, but like, it's like I currently have maybe 7 to 8 desktop applications open at any given time on my computer, right? Remember the time, like literally like 5 years ago when it used to be just one, right? It used to just be Chrome. Like that was it. That's all I had. And in the last 5 or 10 years, it's changed. And now I have ChatGPT. I have a desktop app. I have Slack. I have a desktop app. I don't use the web browser, which I used to, 5, 10 years ago. I have Notion, right? I have Chrome. This is me. I'm a startup guy. So I probably maybe a different stack from some of you, but like, that's all the things I have. Like, it's annoying. Like it sucks. Like I don't want to, when I'm asking ChatGPT a query, I don't want to have to split up from that in the browser experience. In fact, I think of these things as inextricably linked. I often want to go to ChatGPT to find the right website, not to give me the answer directly, which is all it does today. And then when I'm browsing, I often want a Gen AI response to what I'm doing. So I think it makes total sense to combine these two things. I don't know yet what the exact example of how that's going to work is going to be because I've only used Neo for a couple of days. It's still new to me, but the concept and the business logic makes complete sense. And it's it's a multi-billion dollar opportunity, right? It's like, it could be, a browser, or AI interface is huge. So it's very exciting.
Cool. This is a completely unscripted. Now let's get on to the AI impact to your company. Not just the product within Gen. We are very excited about doing AI. What is the impact of AI when ChatGPT came? Right? What was in your mind? What does that change? What did that change to your own product?
Yeah. So, I come at AI from a different perspective than a lot of people you'll hear talk for two reasons. One is I'm non-technical, right? I never got an engineering degree. I've never really written a line of code, maybe a little bit of HTML, but that's, as you know, kind of a joke. I am a economics major who has worked as a founder for 15 plus years. So I view myself as more like a right brain humanities thinker than I am like a left brain, like highly first principles thinker about AI. I have always viewed AI as a very strong productivity companion for work and to automate away are the easiest tasks we have. But I also think it's dramatically overrated as a job replacement. It's a job enhancer. So could I have one engineer that does 3 engineers' job? I think that's fair. That's probably close to accurate. Honestly, we were kind of doing that before AI. We were already thinking that way. We were thinking smaller teams, smarter people, more experienced. That's what we were doing already. And AI has just made that much easier to do. On the flip side, do I think that a product manager is just going to stop having engineers on their team if they want to build large scale products? I mean, I would argue we're like a decade plus away from that. I might be wrong. I don't know, if I'm being honest. The reason why I think it's going to be very hard is because at least right now, it is very difficult for AI to grok and fully understand extremely large complex systems. And it's very hard for it to get rid of its priors. So they have to figure out how to, and then there's a reason why that happens is because the AI is trained on a very, very large model, in a cloud cluster, like, somewhere offshore, et cetera, or somewhere in the United States. And that is where it uses all its compute. Then it compresses down. And then the AI that you're using when you use ChatGPT is literally like a very compressed version of that. So because of this process, and I've only done a little bit of research on this, so I'm not an expert, but my understanding is there are a number of technical hurdles to get from the process that currently delivers you this magical experience in a client interface via AI to the process that is required to completely take over someone's job. So at Maven, I'm still hiring engineers. I'm looking for lots of engineers. So if anyone in the audience, not the employees at Gen, but other people who are listening online want to come join us, like we're hiring. We're hiring marketers, but my marketers are far more efficient and productive than they used to be. And so I think that that's really the transition that's happened within the company.
This is actually one topic I wanted to discuss with you because in your LinkedIn post, some of the LinkedIn posts, you mentioned the go-to-market engineer, right? Can you explain to the audience what do you mean by GTM engineer and what's your vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly, right, if you look at the functions in an organization, right, whether it's finance and operations, HR, engineering, product design, you just name any major function. Sorry if I missed yours, but like any of these functions, each one of them is going to have a like massive change in the way that you do your work, right? And think about it, like this isn't that surprising. You know, some of us remember the days of using like client-side software as the primary way that you did anything, and then we switched to cloud. And like, what were the changes? Like if you were a PM, your analytics suite completely changed. In fact, over my life as a CEO, which has only been 15 years, it's not that long, right? Over my life as 15 years of CEO, the analytics suite has changed every company, and I even missed one or two analytics suites, right? So like, and you have to learn a new mode of operating. You're not just learning a new analytics suite with a different interface. It has different power, right? Essentially, in 2010, when we were doing Udemy, all of our marketers needed to learn SQL. 100% of them had to learn SQL, right? That's what I taught my marketing team. In 2025, do they even need to learn like how to use amplitude in a complex way? Or yeah, today they do. In 2030, they won't. In 2030, they'll be asking natural language. It's a new skill. It's a hard new skill. So go-to-market engineer is one of many new skills that are essentially a redoing of an existing thing. So the correlative is RevOps, right? So you have your sales team. Again, I'm not a B2B guy, so we're talking an area I'm not super expert in, but you have your sales team, and then you have your go-to-market team that is trying to get leads for the sales team and optimize the sales team when they are selling to their end consumer, right? To the prospects. That go-to-market team can be completely reinvented today because you now have AI that can automate a lot of the rote tasks that team used to do.
So the phrase GTM engineer, GTM usually not engineer. Engineer usually doesn't do go-to-market, but you specifically see that a go-to-market team will be more closer to like the way they do things on a day-to-day basis will be like engineer, or that go-to-market team will have engineers powering them up to do things. Why did you coin this phrase, GTM engineer, in the first place?
Just to be clear, I didn't coin the phrase. I adopted it from Clay, which is one of our partners at Maven and a company that we use internally. You know, it's a new form of a outbound marketing system, outbound sales and marketing system. And so what Clay, I think Clay is like the first glimpse of this as a product. Clay, you know, my team onboarded on Clay. So our B2B sales is actually going for instructors, right? So we're looking for like people who have 10 to 20 years of experience, who are really high-end instructors, and they're already experts in their field. They work at top-tier companies, Figma, Notion, whatever, and we're trying to recruit them to teach on Maven, right? So a very specialized person that we're trying to find. We use Clay prior to Clay, we have one person dedicated full-time who's scouring the internet to find these people, okay? Now what we do is we do a hybrid. We also still do the scouring of the internet, and we also prompt Clay and have Clay go and say, okay, Clay, you know, which is essentially like an AI agent, you know, Clay, can you go and find us all the people who have, you know, over 5,000 followers on LinkedIn, because you have to have some sort of audience to be successful on Maven, 5,000 followers on LinkedIn who are experts. They can't be creators who are just posting slop. They have to be posting really unique insights. And Clay is starting to get to the point where it can actually go and find those people. But it's a ton of piping, right? You have to pipe Clay into your CRM. You have to get Clay to look at the right sources. And then you have to make sure that it's integrated with your sales team that's then going and talking to them. The go-to-market engineer's job is to look at all of this software and use either a combination of code, which our go-to-market engineers don't, but some do when you get really advanced, and a combination of just using these high-powered pieces of software to amplify the dollars in that you're spending on that team, right? Versus the output you're getting out of it. How many leads are you getting per $100,000 of employee spend, right? And that's what we're optimizing.
So it's more than just using Clay. What I'm hearing is also they may actually need to do some integration work. And then that will be a traditionally engineer type of people would do. Is that how to think about it? Like meaning the person needs to be somewhat technical.
Yeah, it's probably something like a product manager rather than engineer, right? Product managers typically have quite a bit of understanding of the technology behind whatever they're building, but they don't need to be able to write code. That's probably a GTM engineer. And we just didn't used to have in marketing such technically savvy folks outside of performance marketing. So in performance marketing, you've had this type of technically savvy person for a decade plus. But when you start getting into demand gen for
Lead gen.
B2B, lead gen, et cetera, it's more of a, I'll call it qualitative marketer, someone who's thinking about the human, thinking about product marketing, et cetera. And I think that that's this performance marketing, sort of more quant based is starting to get into the type of person who needs to be a GTM engineer. So that's what a GTM engineer is.
Yeah, very interesting. So I actually also observed the similar things, not just in that GTM engineering side, but also like a system. What used to be sales engineer or sales system engineer, a lot of them need to be more technical than before. Palantir has this notion of the FDE. I don't know how much you heard about it, forward deployed engineer. The basic notion is the sales engineer or the system engineer are much closer to, or have the skill set of the engineers. So in some ways, this mega trend of the collapsing or the line between the go-to-market and engineer gets, blurry and blurry is kind of the mega trend that, I'm seeing.
I love that. And honestly, I hadn't thought about this till this conversation, but a lot of people are talking about how engineering jobs are going to go away. And I don't know if that's true. I don't think it's true. I could give you a bunch of reasons, but at the very least, someone who understands systems thinking in the way that engineers do and is able to pipe data and information and build logic into systems is going to be very useful in almost every other function. So it is, as I'm making this up on the fly. So just take this as like a very random thought that you should all noodle on your own and don't take this as some sort of proclamation yet. But like, I'm going to think about this a little bit more, but like, it's very possible that engineers, like we just hired an Amazon engineer who also did really well on TikTok. He started building a TikTok following while he was working at Amazon. And we just hired him to be a marketer at Maven. He's not going to do engineering at all. Like, I would love for him to also do engineering, but I have to be like, no, strictly like you got to do marketing. That's the most important thing for him right now. So he's pivoted. He's got an engineering background. He went to, I think, UT Austin, great school. And now he's going to become a marketer. So I think that's going to happen a lot more. This sort of like, I talk about on my LinkedIn, like generalists, right? It's like, you need to learn the skills that are adjacent to your skill set. If you're a designer, you got to learn how to like convince the business people to care about your designs. And you also probably need to build like the first version of prototypes on your own, especially when you're doing a 0-to-1 product, right? If you're a product manager, you probably need to learn how enough to vibe code just like a basic version of a test so that you're not asking your designers or engineers to do it. And then you probably also need to know enough about the business side to be able to integrate the user insight and the business understanding all the way into whatever you're vibe coding for your customer. So I think that the blurring of the lines is very real today.
Yeah, I think, at least for a lot of the Silicon Valley startups, I have seen, if it's like a 5 or 10 people startup, I see that each of the marketing person is a programmer in some ways, right? It's unimaginable 5 years ago, but, next 5 years to say marketing person is a programmer is going to be more and more real, out there. So with that, I wanted to see whether, people in the audience have any questions. I have plenty of questions, but, if people in the audience has any questions. If not, I will just ask a few random questions I collected, online from our Neo Show community. One is like, how's the instructor IP being protected in this sort of the Maven model? Is that good for them? Is that like, how to think about it? There is another question related, which is, I guess, you mentioned that you are going to curate and then recruit a lot of the great instructors, right? Is that your focus, or the focus is actually for the next 10x growth of Maven, you are going to focus on the user side, recruit lots of users? These two questions are not the same, but maybe you can answer together.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so Maven's a two-sided marketplace, similar to Airbnb or Upwork or any number of companies. We have instructors that we recruit who are the top end of their field. And then we have users who are also often at the top end of the field. Like we have, employees of Google, Meta, OpenAI, et cetera, hundreds of them for each of these companies that come and learn on Maven. So the top AI people are already starting to use Maven to upskill on things they need. And that's why I'm saying I think we have a chance of it being inevitable. The company is at a stage where we could 10x the user base without changing our instructor pool at all. That's actually kind of what we did over the last couple of years. And now we're big enough. We're about 20 employees. We're going to grow to about 25 to 30 by the end of the next year. We have enough effort that we can kind of put effort on both. So to answer your question, we are now both recruiting instructors and recruiting students. And they're different jobs. One's more of a marketing job. One's more of a sales job, and sort of a concierge sales model because we really help them succeed. Now, the instructors on Maven are really interesting. Why do we have such good instructors, right? Why would I say so confidently, so arrogantly that we have better instructors than Harvard? It's the incentive model. Our instructors make 90% of the revenue. They own their content fully. They own their IP. We don't take their IP. If they want to leave Maven, they can leave at any time. We have outstanding retention. They don't tend to leave, but they could. And as a result, we're able to get people who actually would do this as their own business. And they kind of do it either on the side while they're working at Amazon or Meta or Google or OpenAI, or they do it as a business full-time, and they sort of go into semi-retirement mode. And that has allowed us to recruit really high quality instructors and allows them to retain their IP.
So how do you solve the signaling issue we just talked about earlier, right? Because, Harvard, Stanford, continuing education still has a name of Stanford and Harvard. But how do you solve the signaling issue? Because I've taken this Maven course. Why would an Amazon hiring manager care or not care?
Well, as I said earlier, the Amazon hiring manager doesn't care about any course you've taken other than your bachelor's degree and maybe your master's degree. So anything else, which are like, we're talking billions of dollars of revenue for these universities, right? If you go to Cornell and you take their 6-week AI program versus you take Maven's 2 or 3 week AI program, we also have 6-week ones, but like the hiring manager doesn't care either way. In fact,
so you are basically saying you are not solving that problem because hiring managers do not care in the first place.
But you know what they do care about? They care about when they ask you a question about Gen AI in an interview, you need to have a damn good answer, right? You need to sound smart. You need to be smart on the subject. So who's more likely to teach you how to be smart on the subject? The person who's literally working at Meta or Google, who is the head of product of a major function, has been working on AI for 10 years in production. Or, by the way, this is where Harvard gets its instructors. Or the person who gets paid like $3,000, who has no real affiliation from Harvard, by the way. They're not professors usually. Maybe they are. Who works at a 5th-tier company who you've never heard of before, teaching a course on the side. That's who teaches most Harvard extension courses, most UCLA extension courses. It's just a random person who happens to be friends with someone at Harvard or Stanford. Okay. And I would say,
I think that's more Harvard than Stanford, for the record.
Did you go to Stanford?
Yes. With all the kidding aside, we have.
By the way, this is not for the MBA program. The MBA program is different. They have a higher criteria. But for their extension schools, it's just random people. I mean, really, truly, it's far less curated than Maven. It's much harder to become an instructor at Maven than it is to be an instructor at Stanford's extension school.
But you did, I don't know today, but based on our past conversation, you seem to have the aspiration to even disrupt MBA program from Harvard, Stanford.
Yeah.
What's in your mind? Can you share with the audience?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what's the building block of education, right? If you take a MBA program at Harvard or Stanford, and by the way, we talk about Harvard and Stanford, I kind of made a mistake. Like next time, I'm not going to do that. Next time, I'm going to talk about
Harvard.
Next time,
lots of issues.
No. Next time, I'm going to talk about San Jose State. Right. Next time, I'm going to talk about UC Berkeley, maybe, which is where I went to school, and I don't mind making fun of it. Next time, I'm going to talk about UT Austin or University of Michigan. Right, just under that top tier. Okay, but for the extension programs, I think it applies. But for MBAs, it's different. So most people who go to an MBA program they get 3 things out of the MBA program. They get an education in business, they get a network, and they get 2 years off in their life, right? These are the 3 things they get, right? Like, and 2 years off is actually very valuable. I took 3 years off between Sprig and Maven. I wouldn't trade it for the world, right? So it was worth, $200,000 to me. Of course, I can afford it, but still, it was worth it. So those are the 3 things you get. Today, Maven only gives you one of those 3 things. I would argue that if you spent $20,000 on Maven, you would get a better education, just the education component, than you would at Harvard MBA or Stanford GSB. Sorry, Howie. You would get a better education. You would learn more about accounting, marketing, finance. You'd learn more about product management. You'd learn more about engineering today. Why? Because we have people who are actually in that job today, right now. And so whatever you learn today on Maven, you will get to use tomorrow, because that's what the leading companies are doing. Now, as anyone will tell you, we don't provide the network. Oh, and then the credential. We don't provide the network, the credential, or the time off, right? Don't forget, 2 years off. Some people talk about it as a dating pool, right? This is very valuable. But we believe that eventually we can provide those 3 things, right?
By the live cohort, you get a network.
You start to. It's a small network. I'm not going to overpromise to you guys. You're only in a class for 3 weeks. If you're only going to spend 3 weeks, you're getting the same network that you spend 2 years at Harvard? No, of course not. But are you going to meet people who are at the same level in your career, who are learning the same things that you are at the same spot? You will in Maven. And we need to get a lot better at it, if I'm being honest. We have more to grow. We have more to prove, more to improve to get there. But you will get some of the network. What happens eventually if I say, okay, well, Harvard, you can learn from a professor. By the way, to be a professor at one of these universities, you have to spend 7 years on a PhD program. You mostly, except for a few schools, you mostly cannot be a professor unless you spend 7 years at a PhD program. What happens if you spend 7 years at a PhD program? You spent 7 years building nothing. No revenue, no customers, no politics in the workplace, no need to work with any peer set. You sit in a room in a lab and you study something. So eventually, I think people will wake up and realize that that is not the person that you want to learn negotiations from. That is not the person that you want to learn the ROI of business or how business models work. That's not how you want to understand a P&L. That's not where you want to learn about AI. You want to learn about AI from people like you, like me, people who have done this for 20 years, in the field at big companies. And so eventually, I think the prestige of Maven will increase. Today, most of you have never heard of it. 95% of the audience had never heard of it. That's okay. We're still small. We're only doing, tens of millions of dollars in course sales right now. Eventually, we'll do hundreds or billions, and you'll have heard of it, just like all of you have heard of Udemy. And so if we're able to accomplish that, the big difference we're going to make between Udemy and Maven is Maven's going to be more prestigious, right? So ideally, and of course it's a little bit far flung, maybe we won't compete with Harvard, but maybe if you don't get into Harvard or Stanford, you go to Maven instead. I don't know, right? Maybe you don't go to UC Berkeley Haas, or you don't go to, UT Austin McCombs. I don't know. Let's see. We got to prove it. Some of you take a course, hopefully you have an L&D budget. You can use some of that towards it. Email me. Tell me if we're delivering on the potential of this vision. We're nowhere close to the full vision, but was this course better than what you could get at a university in the same amount of time at the same cost? I can almost guarantee you 80-90% of our students would say, yes, it's better already today.
Okay, so back to AI for a second, right? I think you had another, I just saw, you had another LinkedIn post saying that the AI is, maybe overhyped, maybe underhyped at the same time. Can you just share with our audience what's in your mind? For any company, Gen Digital is no exception. We wanted to move into AI first company. What do you see? The overhyped versus underhyped part of it.
Yeah, there are all sorts of overhyped parts of AI. I mean, the biggest thing is the doomsday scenarios, right? You've heard this, right? All jobs are going to be eliminated in 5 years, right? By the way, we're already 3 years in. None of that happened. Okay. And it's never gonna, I mean, it's not never gonna happen. It's gonna happen very slowly over a long period of time. So I think the job replacement is super overhyped. I think that the speed at which AI innovation occurred, this is really like, I'm not an expert here. This is me learning from other experts and telling you what I've heard. You know, what people will say at dinner parties, but won't say on X or LinkedIn because it doesn't go viral. So what they'll say is, look, there's a lot of hurdles between here and AI getting good enough to fully take over an employee or a job. But so it's overhyped there. It's overhyped in, you know, it's going to take 10 years for it to take over CRM. You know, like how long will it be until Salesforce will lose, or HubSpot will lose to an alternative AI native CRM? It's not going to happen in 2 years, right? It's going to take 10 years. These are huge companies we're talking about. But I think it's going to happen. So I think it's underhyped in the sense that probably not underhyped so much as just underappreciated, right? Like, I think a lot of people don't really, and even I would say, like, I'm still learning exactly how it's going to be used, exactly what's going to make it special, because it's not going to look exactly the same as the last one. Like, remember, mobile gave rise to Uber and Lyft. No one thought that was like, no one guessed that. No one had that on their bingo card when the iPhone App Store was launched. So I think we just don't really know all of the things that are going to happen with
Basically,
AI.
you're saying that killer applications or killer use cases are yet to be discovered and explored, whether for consumers and the enterprise. That's how you think about it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's kind of looking at almost from the corporate point of view. But what about, you know, the advices you have for our employees other than taking Maven courses? Do you know what other advices you would have for them?
And by the way, just to be clear, like, my thesis on Maven is a thesis for education broadly. It's not just about Maven. So even if you don't take courses on Maven, you should take courses somewhere in the world. You should do education over your life. That's really what I'm trying to say. It doesn't matter.
Do you think that in the AI era, it's going to be even more important, more critical by doing this kind of things?
Yes.
Continuing education. Why is that?
When the stack of things that you are using in your work changes, certain people keep up and they stay relevant and other people fall behind. And it's a reality. Now, by the way, even if you fall behind, you can still be very successful. There are plenty of companies that will not be using AI native stacks for like 20 to 50 years. So if you want to do that, like, you can do that. I still think if you're in the top 30% of your field and you decide not to adopt AI, you're still going to be very successful. I don't think it's like all or nothing. Okay. Like, there are still plenty of people out there who are coding server side and client side applications out there and making, you know, good money and have good families, very happy in their lives. Okay. So, but if you want to take most advantage of AI, you have to learn to adopt it, and you have to struggle through the very difficult start period, because it's not that easy to use, actually. It's kind of hard to know what you're going to use it for. Like, you ask it a question, you're like, that question was totally wrong. Like, you ask it to write a LinkedIn post for you, you're like, this post sucks, right? It takes time. Like, it took me a long time to integrate AI into my work. And still, as CEO, I use it less than 10% of my productivity, you know? It's replaced having a chief of staff for me. I don't need someone to go do research on a new market. Like, I've told you a little bit about, like, clearly I know a little bit about universities. I've also thought about buying a university. Like, all that research is just done on ChatGPT. I don't need to. I've had like 3 phone calls and it's all ChatGPT. Like, I know the market for Pell Grants in America. I know the size of it. I know how it's spent. I know what the criteria is. If you want me to tell you about, like, what it costs to buy a university, the answer is $10 to $20 million. Like, I know a bunch of universities in Oakland, my city, that have been sold recently. Like, I know a ton of stuff. It's all from AI. It's very productive, but that's only 10% of my job, right? So I'm not saying that everyone here is just, you know, you're going to do 90% of your job is going to turn over the next 3 years. It's probably 20% of your job is going to turn over the next 3 years, then 50% over the following 10 years. You know, and then 20 years from now, everyone's going to be like, AI, what? That's just what I do every day.
You are basically saying that, you know, in order for you to improve your day-to-day productivity, it takes efforts, it takes investment, initially to get over the hump to even see the 10% of the your job to be, replaced by AI so that you can save that time for something else. But even that 10% takes investment, right? Takes, initially maybe even negative productivity improvement for initially, but then once you get over the hump, you enjoy that 10% saving. That's kind of what you're saying.
Correct. And I can see why you're such a good interviewer, and you do a great job of this, because he summarizes everything I say much better than I do.
Well,
So thank you for that.
inspired by you. So I actually was talking to a friend even this morning. You may actually know him, Yuchen. He was your number 2 AI instructor in 2024. So I was talking to him about,
Yes.
he has this AI course, on Maven. And I was asking, because I wanted to talk to you today, I asked his experience, right? One of the things he said, okay, I'm going to make my course, available to employees, and then they're going to like it. But there's some observation he made that I thought that's very interesting. I thought I would ask you, so one thing he observed is there is a less, there's an incentive mismatch in the sense that, for instance, if we provide a tool for employees to do coding or to do article writing faster, that person still get the same salary. That person is not going to get less busy. Potentially, I use the tools, I kind of learned from Maven, and then my boss, my manager is going to give me more work to. So it's not for everyone, clearly not for everyone. Clearly there are enough people who's motivated, but then he also saw, there is clearly, for a good chunk of the people, he saw that the motivation is not enough there, or incentive is not there. What do you think about this?
Yeah. Learning in general is very hard. And the returns on investment take time to present themselves. And so you have to muddle through that time period, just like you do with, I even said this, even if you're not taking a course, right? Just with learning AI, you have to muddle through it. You have to learn. So yes, I think that we have done a good job of dramatically improving the retention rates and engagement rates via cohort-based learning, right? So just so everyone understands, the retention rates of a Udemy course are something like 4 to 10% through the course. So this is extremely low. They've done a ton of studies on this. Video-based courses are super high motivation. You have to really be motivated. And if you are super motivated, you can learn anything in the world today. You could even learn it without paying Udemy, right? You can go on YouTube, et cetera. Like every level of motivation has there's a free component to learning, then there's like a low cost component, then there's a high cost, and each of them have different motivation and time components to them, right? So of course you can learn AI on your own too, by the way, like you can. And so what you're asking is, how do you deal with the fact that, like, if I learn AI, I will get more work to do. And also, like, will I actually get a promotion? And the answer is yes, you will get promoted. The people at your company who are the most AI savvy over the next 5 years, I will bet on that group of people to be the highest performing in terms of raises, promotions, taking on new responsibility and scope, working on the most interesting things. Is it going to happen 3 months after you start learning AI? No, it's going to happen like when the promotion comes up. Like there's not a promotion cycle every 3 months, right? I don't know what it's like at Gen, but usually it's 6 months to a year, right? And so, and then is it going to show up in the first promotion cycle? Maybe not, because you just learned it. And by the way, if you just learned it, it's going to take you 6 to 12 months to perfect it, to get it right, for it to actually work, for you to actually use it. Then it might take you another year to convince your peers that because you might have to do some integrations. Like learning AI for productivity's sake, yeah, you can probably get most of the gains in the first 3 to 6 months. But for anything else, like if you want to learn AI to build agentic applications, it's going to take 3 years for you to build the application, because you're going to have to, you're going to build the first version. It's going to be okay. It's going to make, you're going to iterate. Everyone here has built products. You guys all know what I'm talking about. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect that you'll get the dopamine hit, by the way. Like if you pay attention in class, or you even just, again, learn on your own, whatever it is, if you learn AI, you will immediately start to see the advantages of learning it, no matter what way you use it, whether it's productivity or using it to build products. But it might take a few years for it to sort of materialize in the end product, which is more revenue for your company and more revenue to you. right?
Interesting. So I was going to ask one more question, but I think you already gave me the answer. I was going to ask you how to measure the value of the learning here, right? The metrics, but you are saying that it's the old metrics, how soon you are going to get promoted, how much revenue you're going to get. You are not going to invent a new sort of the AI learning metrics, right? It's still the same metrics. So with that, do we have any question from the audience before I ask one last question to you?
Having a question. Might be more of a silly question, but it sounded like you had interest in actually investing in universities. What would that do to your business model if unless I misunderstood that?
Buying a university.
Yeah,
So maybe one day Howie asks me, hey, are you accredited? Do you have credentials? And I say, yeah, we are actually. And your employer will pay for it more, will pay more money for it because we have a credential from a university. Personally, I'm like very uncertain whether that has any ROI at all. I think our current customer doesn't care. But, building a business is about thinking about, you start with the bullseye, right? You start with the people who really, really need your product. That's today. That's people who literally work in AI or want to transition into AI right now. That's who's using Maven. So we have I don't remember, it's like few hundred people from Amazon, few hundred people from Microsoft. They're at the bleeding edge. They're spending money out of their own pocket, right? It's like average course, like $1,000, spending money out of their own pocket to learn AI on Maven. That is our bullseye. As we grow the market to more and more people, to people who are more skeptical, people who don't like spending time learning, people who are uncertain about AI in general, as that grows, maybe we need to do things to appeal to that market. And so maybe one day we'll acquire a university in order to say, hey, we're accredited. Again, I would say I'm not convinced, and that's certainly not the bleeding edge of people don't care. The top 20% of Silicon Valley thinks universities are going to die, right? That's the top 20%. But there's another 80% that really value it. So over time, we're going to have to hit that 80%.
So I understand you want to disrupt Harvard, but not Stanford, right? But the kidding aside, my co-host Excel, he's very motivated to get into Stanford. I think, he should get a, education from Stanford or any, great schools. So my question is, the last question is, what's your advice? We talked about for the enterprise, for the employees, but what about next generation, right? The kids of our employees or, my co-host, they're kind of a year to get into the workforce, right? They are maybe a few years away, or maybe they are 1 year away. What is your advice to them? There are a number of reasons I'm asking this question. One is obviously Excel, he's actually very motivated to get into still the traditional education. But at the same time, if you look at a new college grad, graduates, they are looking for a job. It's much tougher today than 2 years ago or even a year ago. What does that mean to that generation or the next generation? What's your advice to them?
Let's start at K-12 and then go to college. So for K-12, for parents of K-12 learners, there's this company called Alpha School. He did a podcast recently I'd highly recommend listening to. But essentially over the next 12, 15 years, I think you have a real opportunity and also a big challenge, right? The opportunity is that your kid can probably learn 2 or 3 times faster today than they used to be able to learn, and they don't need to attend class. So you can give them the tools and software. Khan Academy has a good piece of software. There's lots of out there. I don't know the stack, but you can give them the tools to learn math, science, English, whatever they want, to learn way faster. It's far more efficient than school is. That's really exciting.
Because of AI? Because of what?
Because of AI. Because AI will customize the lesson directly to the skill level that your student is at. And that is very hard in a classroom of 30 people. With 30 people, everybody gets the same lesson, but everyone's at different levels in their skill. Some people who are in 3rd grade, I know parents are going to hate this, but your kid needs to go back to 1st grade math, okay? Because your kid forgot the multiplication tables, doesn't remember it. And if they learn 1st grade math, and then they learn 2nd grade math, and then they learn 3rd grade math, in 1 year, they'll get to 4th grade math and they'll still be in the 3rd grade. You can do that. But if you don't remediate your child, you'll be screwed. If you say, no, they have to be at the bleeding edge, what will happen is they'll go to 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and they'll never have really gotten perfect at 1st grade math. And so they'll never get there. That's a little anecdote, but like the point is they can use AI to customize to the level of the learner. And therefore they can learn much faster because it will remediate them to the point that they are actually at in the learning journey, force them to learn that thing, and then they'll go up from there and they'll have a much better foundation. So AI is super powerful. Now there's a second problem. Everyone has already kind of talked about this, seen this. Social media was extremely powerful for society. I think there's lots of positives. We underestimate the positives, but let's be honest, is also very damaging for a set of society, right? People get obsessed, cyberbullying, etc. Lots of challenges. AI will have the same thing. So how do you teach our children? How do we teach our children? Let's talk about myself. How do we teach our children to use it responsibly in a way that is going to be effective for learning, where I think it's super powerful, while also ensuring that they don't use it for like dating advice or use it for like advice on how to deal with a bully at school or whatever, because I'm very skeptical that that's going to be effective. Like I think that there's human lessons that should be learned by humans, and then there's like objective lessons, let's call it objective things that are true. Like, what is the capital of, Nebraska, which actually I forgot that. So just randomly, but like, maybe it's Lincoln. Anyways, what is the capital of Nebraska, right? That's AI, perfect for that, right? Or even writing a really good English essay, maybe eventually, or reading The Catcher in the Rye. Maybe AI will be a good assistant for that. But you still should read the book, first of all. And then second, so you have to figure out, I think it's a big challenge for K-12 parents and for me as well. And then after K-12 in college, I think the real thing is like spend less time in school. Like it's a waste of time. Okay. Like that's my advice. I know it's counterintuitive. Go to school. Like I will probably like, I don't know, 20 years from now, I hope that there's an alternative to school, alternative to college and MBAs. Like go to college and MBA because you're going to meet really interesting people, because you're going to get 4 years off, right? College is 4 years off and MBA is 2 years off. Don't forget about that, right? These are valuable things, like truly valuable things for you in your life, but don't go to class. It's a waste of time. Learn the material in whatever the fastest way is. Some people it's going to class. For most people, it's not, I think. Only if your teacher is really good. The top 10% of teachers, you got to go to class because they're really good and they'll teach you well. The other 80%, they suck and they're just not that good. Like professors don't care about,
not Stanford.
Even at Harvard. Yes, sorry, not Stanford, of course. God forbid. So the point is, like, you should use college for what it is and don't use college for what it's not. If you spend, even when I was in school, I spent less than, of the total time on my calendar that was school, I spent less than 50% of it in class. So I didn't attend 50% of my class in college. I graduated in 3 years. I had the best internships, or close to. I didn't get into Bain and McKinsey, but I got into Microsoft. It was pretty good, right? Like at that time, 2008, right? 2007. Like I got that, and I got a good job after college, and I ended up building I had a great career afterwards because I still benefited from college. I grew up in college, right? And like, I'm not saying that we should get rid of that. I'm just saying, like, I don't think the teachers are very good. So like you don't really need to learn. My economics 101 professor was fantastic. I loved going to class. My economics, labor economics professor was a bore, and I would learn way more if I just look at the test, look at the material, read the book, and like there are different ways to learn. So that's my recommendation for people going to college and MBAs. Don't go to class.
Thank you very much. I think if I summarize a lot of what you said is, the future, whether for employees or for students, we are going to have a very different skill set. A lot of those skill sets are not going to be learned in the more traditional, whether the top school or not top school, it doesn't matter. It's the learning will be, important. Continuing learning will be important. Hopefully, maybe some of you are going to sign up with Maven, but regardless, learning is going to be key for the AI era. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.